What a day of hearings. It's so good to be here with y'all. Thanks for the love from the chat coming in. I didn't want to interrupt that. Today's hearings were extremely juicy. We really didn't hear anything about how Trump was directly coordinating with the Oath Keepers and with, the Proud Boys and their leaders until Cassidy Hutchinson mentioned it at the end of her hearing. We've heard about it, but we didn't hear about it from people testifying in front of the committee until then. And oh my God, the way that they have been running through the evidence that we have, they're really making the case, against Donald Trump and everyone who is working with him. And yes, a lot of people are talking about this in the chat. It's the court of public opinion, right? This isn't a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. And it's important to remember that. And I think they're doing a really good job communicating exactly what happened to the American people. I really like all of the chats about the amount of ketchup on the wall. And when I was looking down, I was checking my phone. I made a Truth Social account because I wanted to see what Donald Trump was saying. He hasn't posted anything in 3 hours. And 3 hours ago, he was talking about a race. And then we've got a statement. The failing New York Times is down 40% year to date because they're fake news, the reporters are dishonest, and their front page has become a work of total fiction, not news. They hate our country. They hate reporting the truth. Fake news, fakes news. Oh, impeachment hoax number 1, impeachment hoax number 2. They obsess over January 6th. Witch hunt, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's a lot of incoherent rambling, but we didn't really get play-by-play tweets from Mr. Trump today, which is disappointing. Nothing to really unpack there. The usual stuff. I think he's scared. I think he's genuinely very scared. And someone pointed out in the chat that no one will testify under oath that Trump is innocent. I think that's a really big deal. That, if you are not in the wrong, if you were not committing crimes, you're not testifying. And we have folks taking the fifth, which goes to show that they know they've done something wrong. This is really damning. And they're acting like the January 6th hearing is a big distraction from what? From shrinkflation, from tortillas, the mini tortillas. They're so small. Andy Biggs on the floor of Congress, because clearly someone he knows bought the wrong package. They come in many different sizes. Just ridiculous that we had an insurrection, an attempted insurrection, and they're saying this is all a distraction. They're trying to trick you. And we still have 40% of the country agreeing that, this election was stolen. When they've demonstrated very clearly that Rudy Giuliani, members of Trump's cabinet, his legal aides, Donald Trump himself, they all knew there was no evidence of fraud. They knew this, and that's really important. They were not acting as if they really believed an election was stolen. They were acting very clearly as a group of militants trying to overthrow the government, and we heard that today very clearly, that these folks were in a group chat with Roger Stone. Friends of Stone was the name of the chat, FOS. They were in communication with them. Not only that, but Roger Stone did the oath on video, which is the first step to joining this group. And even we have members of the group and their leaders saying that this was a militant group. We had training on how to deal with explosives. We had firearms. They were walking towards the Capitol in a military formation. They said, let's call this for what it is. This was an insurrection. He called it a revolution. And so what we heard today, the ties between these far-right militia groups and the Trump administration were pretty strong. And that's terrifying, absolutely terrifying that this was a coordinated effort. I can't say I'm surprised, but it's amazing how much evidence there is. We had, Jason Van Tatenhove of the Oath Keepers, who was doing national media for them, was a spokesperson. He said that Rhodes sees himself as a paramilitary leader, that's what he wants to be. And so by saying it was a revolution, people died that day, this guy's a militia leader, he had grand visions of being a military leader, all of this is super concerning. Then we had Ayers, people in the chat were saying, what's the point of this guy testifying? I think his testimony is really important for a few reasons. I think, one, public education in the United States isn't great. We don't learn a lot about, how our government works. If you take the regular curriculum and you're in a public school, I had to go out of my way to study civics or government when I was in public school. Everyone should have that education. Everyone should understand the structure of our government and how it works. Teaching an accurate history is super important as well, so that you don't fall into these groups that, like Jason Tatenhove was saying today, these folks believe the Holocaust was a lie. We really need to teach accurate history in our public schools in the United States. And so I think having Stephen Ayers testify is super, super important to give that perspective that, hey, unless we have a strong public education system, people are really susceptible to falling into these far-right ideologies. And I do agree with some of the people in the chat, he should take accountability for seeking these groups out. Why was he especially susceptible to that? That's a whole other thing to unpack. But the bottom line is, we're not doing a lot to create an environment that works against people being radicalized to the far right. And that's really, really important. And I think now people are seeing how important that is. And I hope some things change. Will they? I'm not super optimistic. We know that lobbyists really influence curriculum in public schools. And we have to get money out of politics. But moreover, we have to have people really invested in good public education. Right now, I don't know. And I don't want to empathize with people on the far right, but I do think it's really important that we recognize there's a role in our society and how our society is set up that, creates an environment where this can happen. Also, a lot of these people are scared. They're experiencing resources leaving their communities. Public goods are not being used for things that benefit everyday people, right? They're paying taxes, but they see the quality of their schools declining. They see infrastructure crumbling. And if we used public resources to promote public goods and actually invest in our communities, these people would probably have more trust in government. If we actually didn't have large corporations going into small town America, being the only source of jobs for those folks and then leaving, these people wouldn't be struggling. They wouldn't be so susceptible to be fear-mongered. They wouldn't be susceptible to demagogues like Trump. People are really afraid. And that, in combination with the lack of education, puts us in a really scary position where stuff like this can happen. And so we can't fight this with just, these guys are bad, we're going to indict their leaders, because that population of people that can be radicalized is still there. And a lot of folks in the chat, I notice, we're talking about Pence. When is Pence going to testify? Members of the January 6th committee in late June, AP reported this on June 20th, that they were considering subpoenaing him. I think it would be interesting to see that. I think they should probably do it as a deposition, having him testify live. With these guys who are super high up in the administration, who knows what's going to happen if you give them a platform. I think they're doing the right thing by having the folks highest up not give live testimony and instead do these hour-long depositions behind closed doors, and they choose what footage they show to the public. And I know we're going to have to say something about the Vietnam comments, because that wasn't necessary. It wasn't the time or place to talk about that, I think, because especially when you look at the footage and you see insurrectionists at the Capitol that day on January 6th flying the flag of South Vietnam, maybe using Vietnam to make your point about how great America isn't the best idea. And for those not familiar with the Vietnam War, the South Vietnam was fighting the communists in Vietnam. And you have insurrectionists at the Capitol flying the flag of South Vietnam. And obviously, to fully unpack this, we would need a lot more time than I want to give to this. But let's understand that there's a lot more nuance to this, and making the case that communism is bad and I fled Vietnam because of communism when we're talking about an insurrection in the United States, it's just not the time or place to be saying stuff like that. I just don't think that was a good faith argument. And the last thing I want to touch on is in Fulton County, in Georgia, there's a grand jury that's hearing a case. They're being presented evidence. It's not a criminal case. They're deciding whether or not to press charges. So it's a weird situation. But the attorney that's on the case, her father was a member of the Black Panther Party. He's someone who fought for his right to vote, and she really values democracy. And she sees this as a very, very important case. And she says that the jury is representative of the country. It's just as diverse as the country she loves. And that signals to me that they've got a good jury. Something good might come out of this, because God knows what Merrick Garland is doing right now all of my eggs are in the basket of Fulton County, Georgia, where they're hearing and investigating potential criminal activity around the presidential election in 2020 in Georgia, in Atlanta. And they just announced, I think last night, maybe 12 hours ago, that they will be subpoenaing Lindsey Graham, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Cleta Mitchell, Kenneth Chesbrough, Jenna Ellis, a lot of Trump's legal team, but also some heavy hitters like Lindsey Graham and Giuliani. So this is very, very interesting. I think we are going to see them go for a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. And who knows what's happening at the national level with Merrick Garland. But I really do think that if we get an indictment for Donald Trump, it is going to be in Fulton County, Georgia first, before anywhere else. But I would like to be proven wrong. I would like for it to happen faster because we know the grand jury process. They have to go through all of this, hear all of the evidence, and then decide, should we criminally prosecute Donald Trump? And then they have to criminally prosecute Donald Trump, and he might be very well into his 2024 campaign by the time that happens. And that is super scary, especially when you look at the polls. So most recent polling within the Republican primary, all right, we know that it's kind of head-to-head, leaning towards Trump for a general election. If it's a Biden-Trump matchup, Biden-Trump mashup, they're not running together. But yeah, if it's those two in the general, it might lean Trump, because wherever the polls show that Biden is winning, the win margin is within the margin of error of the poll, which doesn't bode well for Joe Biden right now. But if you look at the polling of people who vote in the Republican primaries, it's pretty concerning. It looks like it leans towards Donald Trump. DeSantis is trailing behind by like 25 or more points. Trump getting about 49% of the vote. Now, the New York Times is the one who conducted this poll. It has about 350 respondents. And if you do the statistical calculation, which I did, they've got about a 5% margin of error. And if we want to be 99% sure that what we're seeing is not random sampling, the margin of error goes up to about 7%. So a lot can happen in the Republican primary between now and the point where they, choose their candidate to go forth to the general. But I think that's a little concerning that Trump is leading by that much. But, it could go to DeSantis. A lot can happen, and the polling's not conclusive that Trump would absolutely have the lead, which I think is a good sign.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.